Yes, I was first diagnosed, actually not to my knowledge, as being possibly bipolar when I was about 15. I didn't know this until much later when I made a documentary about my life as a manic depressive or someone with bipolar disorder, whatever you choose to call it. An uppy-downy, mood-swingy kind of guy. In fact, technically, I believe the correct diagnosis for my condition is cyclothymic, which is like also known as bipolar light in America, which is rather nice. It makes it sound like a variety of cola. But bipolar disorder is a mood disorder rather than a personality disorder, such as that might mean anything to anybody, but I think we all kind of get what that is. To me, mood is the equivalent of weather. Weather is real. That's the important thing to remember about weather. It is absolutely real. When it rains, it rains. It is wet, you get wet. There's no question about it. It's also true about weather that you can't control it. You can't say, if I wish hard enough, it won't rain. But it's equally true that if the weather's bad, one day it will get better. And what I had to learn was to treat my moods like the weather. On the one hand, denying that they were there and saying, I'm not really depressed, because why should I be depressed? I've got enough money, I've got a job, people like me. There's no reason to be depressed. That's as stupid as saying there's no reason to have asthma or there's no reason to have a measles. You've got it. It's there. It's not about reason. You don't get depressed because bad things happen to you. That's getting pissed off and annoyed. That's reasonable. Someone hits you in the face, you go, ow. But depression is something that happens like weather to you, inside you. And it's not about, it can be triggered by something unfortunate, but it isn't, it's not enough to talk yourself out of it by saying, but I shouldn't be depressed because I've got people who are nice to me, which is frustrating for people outside who go, don't be depressed, everyone loves you, you're really happy, you've got a good life. I know, that's what's so depressing, I can't help it. But once you, no, it's not a solution, but anyway, it's very important at least to get that stage of it out of the way, is to recognize it as a mood disorder, as something that is akin to weather. But the nature of manic depression or bipolar disorder is it is bipolar. It is two poles. It's not just depression. The point is that there is this other side to it. You have a depressed mood, you have an elevated mood, known as mania, which is the manic side of manic depression. And these are hypomanic or hypermanic states in which you can be grandiose, you can be absurdly extreme in your optimism, in your creativity, in your energy. You go for ages without sleep. You can be sexually promiscuous. You can be a shopping addict. People have different ways in which their elevated moods are expressed, and they talk 19 to the dozen. They can't stop thinking. Their mind races. They think they can solve the problems of the world. They think they have a unique insight. It can be a very blissful and exciting and extraordinary state of mind to be in. And then comes the crash. The problems of it are manifest and intense. One is that most people outside, family and friends, are more annoyed and more uncomfortable at the manic phase than at the depressed phase. A depressed person you can deal with because all they want to do is just sit there and they want to be in the dark in the bedroom, sleeping and not doing any work and just hating themselves. And as long as they're not, really considering suicide, as long as the pain isn't that bad, then you can manage them, whereas a person in an elevated state is just unmanageably annoying. They won't stop talking, they won't stop jigging their knees up and down and getting excited and talking about things and changing things and retidying rooms and like that. So, it can be a very frustrating for people around you. At its worst, it can be very dangerous. It can obviously suicide is the downside of depression. I had several suicide attempts in my life, but also. Really, and this always sounds like a feeble excuse, but it is true, the most natural way you would attempt to cope with something inside you that is affecting your moods and your energy levels is to intervene with chemicals to help. And because medical science hasn't come up with pharmaceuticals that do it particularly well, you tend to reach for the chemicals that are outside the pharma counter, i.e. Narcotics and alcohol. Because they can guarantee your mood, more or less. They, like the condition itself, will store up a big crash or a big reverse, but you just keep at it, and you keep getting drunk, keep getting wired, and you'll stave off the inevitable disaster of being alone with your moods. So for a long time I was I suppose dependent is the word, on cocaine powder. And naturally, when you take a lot of cocaine powder, you tend to take a lot of alcohol with it as well. So for many years, really, I never went out without at least 4 or 5 grams of cocaine powder on my person. And I would ingest it intranasally, as was the fashion, through the use of some sort of straw or rolled up currency note, and managed to get by on it. I never did that when I was working. Didn't do it on stage or on while filming or anything. It was a way of ending as soon as you finish, because work provided its own high, but as soon as I finished work, that was it. I was there, hours in clubs and things. I can't believe it now. I don't know how I managed to do it. It's just extraordinary. But I did. And anyway, then I had a bit of a disaster in the mid-90s. I was in a play and it just all went wrong and horrible. And I ran for the hills, as it were. Well, actually, I ran for Belgium, which is not hills at all. I ran for the Low Countries. And through Belgium went to Germany and sort of declared missing by the British for a while. And then I was found, and it was all very ghastly. But it sort of made me confront the whole business of this diagnosis, and I saw doctors and things, and they confirmed the diagnosis. And then a few years later, when I was back on a more even keel and more used to dealing with things and a little bit more clear about myself, I made a program called Manic Depression and Me, or The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive was the proper title, and in which it was 2 one-hour films in which I went around America and England, actually, talking to people with the problem, talking to doctors, talking about my own history and my own condition. And it was really interesting because it was considered something of a success, this program, and something of a breakthrough. And because aside from all the problems I've spoken about, one of the major problems is not with the person who suffers the disease, it's with the rest of the world and mental health disorder and its stigma. People just are terrible at coping with it, other people. They don't like even anyone mentioning it if possible. I had the great pleasure of a dinner last night here in New York with Dick Cavett, the talk show host of the 60s and 70s, brilliant talk show host. Look him up on YouTube if you don't know the shows. Just absolutely wonderful. But his career was pretty much stalled in many ways by his fight with depression, and he's written about it superbly and talked about it, and we were chatting about it last night. And it is that problem of when you say to someone, I've got a broken leg or I've got diabetes, particularly say diabetes and asthma, which are both chronic conditions that won't go away. People go, do you take insulin or do you take a little wheezer thing for your asthma? And you go, yes. And you say, I've got a mental health condition. They go, oh, have you? That's nice. And then they want to be somewhere else. They don't want to be anywhere near you. And I can understand that. Of course I can understand it. But you know that it's like 6 degrees of separation. I think you're never, or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whichever. I don't think you're ever more than 3 or 4 steps away from someone close to you who has a mental health problem. And I think the more we accept that it is us, it is part of being human, then the better we are, because then you can start concentrating on the things that matter in terms of coping with it. It's a really tricky business, that of diagnosing children. On the one hand, it's very good if the diagnosis is sound and you believe in it, to spot the early signs of what could be a very difficult growing up for a child. On the other hand, to give Ritalin or powerful antipsychotic drugs to a child as young as 4 or 5. I spoke to a professor of psychiatry at Stanford University, who's one of the leading people in his field, who is quite prepared to diagnose very young children as being bipolar, not just ADHD and things that we're used to in children. And his point is that non-intervention is not a neutral act. Not giving someone drugs when you've diagnosed it is in itself allowing the brain, as he would put it, to toxify itself. That whatever is happening as the brain is forming, if it is forming in a bad way, bad pathways, bad neural signals are being sent and they're creating bad pathways, as it were, or bad demands for endocrines, because let's face it, we don't really understand that balance between hormone and encephalin, if you like, or hormone and neurotransmitter. But that's his argument, is that non-intervention allows the brain to build itself badly. But it's a heck of a thing to give a child as young as, young as 10, or even as young as 14, frankly, some of these powerful drugs, when the brain is still growing. I find it tricky. And certainly in Europe, it's considered outrageous, but it happens a lot in America. But then you have more mad people. No, I mean, sorry, you have a bigger population and better scientists.